Welcome to the room. Okay, great. All right, Abu, go ahead and tell us your problem, sir. And by the way, are you gonna take another attempt at explaining to us how you would account for the existence of the absolute and universal laws of logic before you actually bring to us your problems? Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Rosan. Well, you see, I'm someone who has been talking to people like you, that Calvinists, followers of Cornelius Van Til, right? I know your approach, presuppositionalist approach. I have much respect for it because what you do is actually it's reflected in the entire history of philosophy. Now today, 21st century, 20th century philosophy, you will see that the atheist philosophy will approach to ethical nihilism and epistemological nihilism day by day, right? They resisted it, they tried to find ways out, but then since Hume and others, now today there's postmodernism, and they are embracing what you say is the consequence of atheism, that they are embracing irrationalism, right? They say that the world is contradictory, there is no possibility for a consistent worldview. Things you say, and this is I believe that this the situation in philosophy is vindicating people like you, that and your the person you follow, Cornelius Van Til. So then you ask me, why do you then still believe? Well, let me tell you one thing. What this is about is this is still a fact about human beings, okay? This is not a fact about reality. This is a fact about reason, and how reason necessitates that something like a concept of a ultimate reality. And if you deny it, then you will you will have these problems philosophically, okay? And then you will end up like people like Richard Rorty and others, right? You have to then admit that there is simply no way out. Yeah. So, but then again, now when you look at it, it still looks like self-deception. Okay, it's like something we have to accept simply because otherwise things don't make sense. Okay, let's accept that there is God. Okay, and actually, I believe that the model cosmological argument actually this proves this conclusion. I believe that it is a sound argument for the existence of God. That from the existence of contingency, we have to accept that there is a necessary being. I accept this, but it also looks like that this is still a fact about reason, that we have to accept this, right? But when you look at the world, now let me come to my objection. Okay, when we look at the world, when we look at history, and when we study natural history of the cosmos and this planet and life, and history of religion, then we come up with certain facts that give us a picture of the world that is not entirely compatible. It's not entirely compatible with this theistic picture. First of all, um, let me tell you one thing. I respect Quintillians, okay? I respect presuppositionalists, apologetics, but you need to also be respectful for science and do not resist Darwinism, okay? Now look at the world picture we have, and you should also not resist, for instance, textual higher criticism of the Bible. Like, for instance, I have in mind things like about the Old Testament. Leave aside the New Testament discussion about Jesus, historicity of Jesus, resurrection, all that. Let's talk about, for instance, the Old Testament, its own formation and theories about that, and how scholars today, most of them do not even believe that any biblical patriarch didn't even exist, right? Abraham, and they don't even believe Moses existed. So this is the picture we have at hand here. And then we have a human history that looks like that there is no God in effect, because you see, it's just our human effort that's keeping, we had to die for thousands of years until we discovered that it's the germs killing us just last in 2 centuries ago. We barely discovering cures for diseases that human children for thousands of years before the age of 5, right? Many things it's just us doing. It looks like we are on our own. There is no divine intervention here. And look at this. I will pass the mic after this one sentence. One time I respect William Lane Craig a lot, okay? One time I was listening to him on YouTube, and somebody asked him, what is the most interesting or powerful atheistic argument against God and Christianity? And he said, I think it would be the hiddenness of God. When you think about it, it's really interesting that we have to debate, we have to prove the existence of this God, but otherwise it looks like we are on our own. And this salvation thing is still something psychological. We just have its psychological effects, like we feel anxiety, we feel relief from anxiety and all that, but in effect we still deal with disease, we lose loved ones, and then we die. Your mic.
Alright, thanks Dabba Doo. Now, if you recall, right at the beginning I asked you to give an account for the existence of the absolute universal laws of logic at the beginning. And then right at the beginning you said, well, let's just presuppose that God exists. And then you continued on with your discussion. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, is that on both counts, number one, you didn't give an account for the existence of these absolute and universal laws of logic. That's number one. And number two, in order to try and disprove the existence of God, you have to abandon atheism. Why is it that you cannot keep your hat on as an atheist and argue as an atheist instead of having to presuppose that my God exists? Because without my God, you cannot account for any intelligibility. You cannot enter into the... See, this is what I'm saying. Why can't you argue against theism from your atheistic worldview? The fact that you have to abandon atheism shows to me that it is insufficient in order to address what theism actually is. I didn't see any valid objections that you raised. Again, you need to account for the existence of the universal and absolute laws of logic. If God doesn't exist, how is it that these things exist? Number one. Number two, you say that I need to respect science. Well, sir, science is basically repeated testing. based on observation. Based upon what do you expect me to respect the scientific method? How can you expect me to respect the scientific method as a valid form reaching conclusions? Again, if you do not, think about this, if you do not presuppose the existence of the absolute universal laws of logic, if you cannot account for that, then you might as well throw science out the window, because you do not have any guarantee of an ordered universe that obeys these laws. And then no matter how many times you repeat an experiment, no matter how many times you observe something, if you repeat something 999 times, the 1000th time that you perform that same experiment, it could go completely the other way. You are presupposing that the universe is ordered. You are presupposing that the universe obeys laws of logic. You need to give an account for this, not just simply presuppose them. From my worldview, it makes sense because the universe is a reflection of God's characteristics. But from an atheistic worldview, you have no able yet to even begin to enter into this discussion. You say I need to respect Darwinism. Why should I respect Darwinism? Why should I? You say I need to respect science, I need to respect Darwinism. Why? Because it's science. No, I don't see that we... Here's the thing, Dabba Doo. Again, this ties into, I guess, the cosmological argument. When you have this idea that everything evolved from a single-celled organism, you are making huge, huge assumptions. You're assuming that a single-celled organism has the ability to not only mutate, but to mutate in such a way that, number one, it maintains its own existence, and this is not even explaining how non-life came to be life, and number two, it doesn't give rise to the diversity in all the species that we have. Okay? Origin of life can be, and evolution can be two different issues. Creation can be origin, evolution does not challenge creation. Well, here's the thing, is that if he wants to talk about theism and atheism and start raising Darwinism, I know what you're saying, Saints of Jesus Christ, that God could have possibly created evolvable entities, right? Yeah, that is a possibility if one wants to reject the biblical data and what the Bible actually tells us. But that aside, you're right, it doesn't actually negate the existence of God. So, Dabba Doo, I don't know why you even bring up Darwinism. I think that Darwinism itself accounts for the origin of life. You talk about the origin of species. Well, what about the first species? What about that very first thing? How do you account for that? What's that origin? Yeah? And again, how can you form any conclusion based upon your scientific method by appealing to the laws of logic, which again, you are presupposing. You give no reason for. And this is the thing. You don't know if the universe is chaotic or if it's ordered. You're presupposing that it's ordered. You're hoping it's ordered. But you give no actual explanation for it. And so, Mike, you can begin to give that account. Not just say, well, it exists. You need to actually account for it, because as far as I can tell, you're making a lot of assumptions but bringing nothing to the table. All right, go ahead, your mic.
Okay, Royal Sun, you see, I told you that I concede all of these. Okay, since David Hume, we know these problems that they will persist, and they are probably insoluble. Okay, I mean. The problem of induction that you mentioned, and about the accounting for all these absolutes of reason, logic, and these are what we cannot account for in an atheistic worldview. I accept all that, okay? But you see, once you assume that we can do science, that let's say, like you say, that we borrow from your worldview, okay? We do borrow theistic, Christian theistic, basic assumptions, and then let's say that we do science, and let's see what we find, okay? What we find is that the universe is 13.7 billion years old, okay? And our planet is 4.6 billion years old. And life evolved here. Life, in all its diversity, it is still chemical at base, right? Like we eat food, and then we exercise. We look at the calories on the package of the food, right? Because we are part of the law of conservation of matter and energy, right? Calories is a measure of energy, physical energy. So you see, the problem here is that science, once you granted the starting point, right, borrowing from your worldview, then it explains everything. The only thing it cannot explain is the laws of physics, where they come from. We do not know that. But after that point, from this beginning of the universe to this moment, everything it happened according to laws of physics, including everything about us. And we can also explain everything about the history of religions, all these stories. We know what happened, and we have a complete, consistent, naturalistic account of everything. Okay, this is why I mentioned Darwinism, because it is making us part of the natural order in a way that we don't need any reference to God or anything divine, any divine intervention to explain anything about life in general or us. We also do not need any divine intervention to explain anything about the history of religion. So this is one problem, okay? That this naturalistic history of everything, of human existence and natural history, all the way back to the Big Bang, we don't need God to explain any part of it. This is one thing. I grant it to you that we do have to accept physics or whatever, something like it, to account for the basic assumptions underlying all science and all knowledge. Okay, that's fine. But I'm telling you, once we are looking at it with from a theistic point of view, from a Christian perspective, sooner or later you have to face the fact that things do not add up. Okay? I mean, you say your basic objection to atheism that it doesn't add up. It's not complete in itself. Like the positivistic mindset or materialism, they all end up in some sort of relativism, pragmatism, like postmodern, denying that truth is not possible. That right? So you see, in the same way, Christian worldview is not adding up either, because you see, once you take the Bible seriously, you have to explain a lot. Okay? I mentioned three things. I said the history of life and Darwinism. Okay, this is incompatible with your Bible. Second, I said the modern historianship, modern scholarship of the Bible, higher criticism, and how they say people like Moses, Abraham did not even exist. There was no Exodus, they say. This is problem 2. Problem 3, I said that there is human existence is full of misery, hardships, disease, and it looks like we are on our own. It doesn't look like there's a God. Okay? Your mic.
All right, thank you, Abu. It was interesting. You said that that you agree that you need theism in order to account for the existence of universal and absolute laws of logic. But then once you have that, you don't need God anymore. Do you see what's happened, guys? He realizes that at the heart of all the assumptions, all the ways that he approaches his way of looking at the universe, at the root of it, he needs God. He needs God in order to make sense of it at the very beginning. And then what does he do? He wants to spit in the face of God, saying, well, I don't need him anymore. Dabba Doo, let me tell you something. You need God just to be able to breathe. When you get up on the mic, you need God to sustain your life. You think that, you can just use him to be able to explain the laws of logic or to account for the laws of logic, and then you can just spit in his face and you don't need him anymore. Not only do you need him for you to breathe, but you need him so that you can talk, you need him so that your body can function, you need him so that you can exist in this universe. You need him to sustain this universe. So please don't tell me that you don't. Now let's have a look at these quote-unquote problems that you have raised. And notice guys, Dabba Doo is basically promoting a complete contradictory position. He recognizes that without God, he cannot make sense of the universe. Yet, on the other hand, he says, once God, then we don't need him anymore, and we can start making sense of the universe in other ways. That's like saying, well, I need to be able to understand what numbers are in order to do basic math, but once I know what those are, I don't need them anymore, and I can do more complex equations. It doesn't make any sense at all, because at the very root, you need God, and everything stems from that. Now let's address some of your false claims regarding Darwinism, its incompatibility with the Bible. You said modern scholarship of the Bible and human life is full of misery and hardship. First, you said human life is full of misery and hardships. Well, I'm surprised that you would raise this as some kind of objection to the existence of God. Why? Because according to you, right, everything happens as it should happen. In other words, if we take basic cause and effect, if we take the complete naturalistic approach to the universe, then this happened because that happened, and this happened because that happened, and this happened because that happened, and it happens exactly the way it ought to happen. And I don't know why you call it suffering and misery, when basically, according to the atheistic worldview, everything is happening perfectly, like clockwork, down to the smallest fraction, to the smallest molecule, smallest atom, smallest particle. Everything is running perfectly by cause and effect. You would use that as an objection against God. Why would it bother you any more than if something happens that makes you happy, Abu? Because everything is working exactly as it ought to run. Now look at this. He says, yes, it looks like just laws of nature ruling supreme. Notice that, guys? He assumes these existence of laws. Now it's laws of nature, not just laws of logic, laws of nature. So we have these laws binding upon the entire universe to no solids, liquids, gas, all phenomenon, all scientific phenomenon, all scientific entities that are bound by these scientific laws. Now, where do these laws come from? Dabba Doo cannot tell us. He would just say, oh, well, they're just there. These laws that everything is bound by. Everything is unified by these laws. Even though you have this diversity are tied into and bound by these scientific laws of nature. And of course, as I mentioned before, to make sense of them, there are the absolute and universal laws of logic. So thank you for showing us again, yet again, that you cannot account for these things which only the Christian worldview can truly give a reason and rational explanation for. Notice everything that you're saying, that you're telling us, is irrational, because you're undercutting God. You're taking God out of the picture, the very one who gives account for the universal laws of logic and indeed the laws of nature. Now, in terms of why do we have misery, why do we have hardships? To the fall of man as accounted for in the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. I'm not sure why you even raised this. You say it looks like there isn't a God, but that's to you, sir. In fact, I would say that everything that you have said so far looks like there is a God. Why? Because there are these laws. There are these physical laws. There are these immaterial laws that are going on that are binding the universe. And that points to a creator. That points to a lawgiver, sir. Okay? The fact that you want to turn away from this God and tell him that you don't need him anymore, even though you needed him in the that doesn't disprove his existence. That shows us that God does exist. Aha! Now we have Abu actually saying it gives rise to a deistic God. Okay, so first of all, he concedes that his atheism is incorrect. He's making a little bit of progress, but not enough yet. Okay, because now he is saying that this God doesn't care for human beings and for their living on the earth. Now let me ask you something, Abu. Do you know what the gospel is? Do you know what the gospel states? Basically, in a nutshell, that if you repent of your sins and you believe into Jesus Christ, that he is Lord God and that he was raised from the dead for our sins, you will be saved. Correct? Correct? Just a second. You see, you're going off on tangents. Just follow me for a second here. You understand what I'm saying, right? And that believing into him, you can have the greatest relationship with God. Yes? Okay. That this reflects a deistic God when this God gives a gospel, which is, and that if you believe and obey in this gospel, then you will have the greatest relationship with your Creator. This is not compatible with a deistic God. This obviously shows a God who does care about those that he's created. Yes? Now, if we go to this matter of that God, we don't see God today. I haven't seen God. Why doesn't God appear to me? Well, let me ask you this. If God appeared to you, Abu, would you believe that he exists? If God appeared to you in some kind of manifestation, would you believe he exists? Very likely. But hang on. What if someone else said, God hasn't appeared to me, therefore he doesn't exist? Is their reasoning sound? Is it logical? You don't know? I'm asking you, is their reasoning sound Is it sound reasoning to say God doesn't exist because he hasn't appeared to me? Or God isn't personal. He at best there's only an impersonal God out there, an impersonal force, because God hasn't appeared to me. So basically, again, you're not bringing any evidence to support your position, whether for a deistic God or for no God at all. Well, it is. It is. Again, now you're going to talk about history. Whose history? Because in the Bible we do have instances of God appearing to his people. But you reject it, Abu, because of your presuppositions. Presuppositions which you have noted are completely irrational because you undercut the very explanation required for the existence of absolute universal laws of logic. Yet you rely on scholars to tell you. You rely on scholars instead of rational thinking. Yet there are scholars on both sides of the fence, correct, Abu? There are scholars on both sides of the fence. So that is not going to help you. Now, with regards to this matter of higher criticism, people can make all kinds of assumptions. For example, let me ask you something. Do you believe in the Q source? Q document. You believe in the Q document, Q source. Okay. Do you have any manuscripts of the Q source? Do you have any manuscripts of the Q source? Okay. Yeah, scholars talk about it. It's a theory. So amongst the 27,000 manuscripts we have in the New Testament, you have not a single manuscript of the Q source. You accept whatever they say. And if scholars tell you that the Q source is a theory based upon zero evidence, will you believe those scholars? Because we could play the scholar game all day. Abu? See, this is actually what you've done, is you've tried to pass the responsibility on from yourself to some scholar to do your thinking for you. Yet you don't realize that even those scholars, like yourself, also operate under certain presuppositions. And you have done nothing to establish why your position is sound or correct, just because scholar such as such a person says so. Science is vast, and yet you still haven't been able to account for the scientific method. Okay? Now, you suggest that Moses didn't exist and Abraham didn't exist. I find this very, very interesting, that you tell us that Moses didn't exist and Abraham didn't exist because, what? Because of some scholars telling you so. Do you believe Jesus existed? Okay. And why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? Why do you believe Jesus existed? Because scholars say he existed, but some scholars say he didn't exist, such as Richard Carrier. Such as Robert Price. Such as Robert Eisenman. They're still scholars, are they not, Abu? Do you see where I'm going with this? You can play the scholar game all you like, it's not going to help you. Now, do you think, let me ask you this, Abu. Was Jesus a liar? Was Jesus a liar? Do you think Jesus was a liar? Was Jesus a liar, Abu? No, I'm just asking you. Oh, okay, so you think Jesus was deluded? You think Jesus was a lunatic, basically? Jesus was a lunatic. Okay. Can you please tell us why you think Jesus was a lunatic. Why you think he was deluded. Why? Okay, because lunatics are a dime a dozen. Okay, so Abu, I think you're a lunatic. And I think you're a lunatic because lunatics are a dime a dozen. Do you see how you haven't actually answered my question? Or am I making an outrageous claim? Am I making an outrageous claim? Jesus did. Oh, okay, hang on a second. What outrageous claim did Jesus make? Let's get to this. What outrageous claim did Jesus make? No, tell me. Tell me, Abu. About being the Messiah, the Son of Man, Daniel chapter 7, maybe even being God incarnate. Oh, and why are these outrageous? Why are these outrageous claims? Outrageous claims, Abu. Because these are highly unusual things to be. Why? Why? How many genuine God incarnates or genuine Jewish messiahs have you met in your life? And that's not answering the question. That is not answering the question. Well, it's about how common those things are. So basically, okay, let's put it this way. You're saying because you have so many Jewish messiahs, is that what you're saying? Because there are so many, or are you saying because there are so few Jewish messiahs? What is it? Please state it plainly. Why do we reject Muhammad? Because his message... I tell you why we reject Muhammad, okay? I'll tell you why, very briefly. Because number one, this is just one aspect why I reject Muhammad. Number one, he said, if you have a dream which you don't like, then it is from Satan. Yet, the beginning of his revelation was in the form of a dream which he didn't like. So by his own criteria, his revelation was from Satan. That's why we reject him. Okay? Simple. See, this is the point, Abu. You've actually shown your inconsistency. You said that if God appeared, you would accept him. You would probably accept him. However, Jesus Christ was God incarnate, man come in the flesh. If you were there, you're telling me you would not accept him because it's an outrageous claim. So you're actually demonstrating that you're being dishonest and that you would not accept God if he appeared to you. So again, you've only shown that your position is inconsistent, it's unreliable, has no justification for it, and basically you're saying, well, here's the interesting thing. Here's the interesting thing. You say that God only exists if he's an impersonal God. He certainly is not a personal God who cares for man's interests. And yet when I demonstrate to you that God is personal and that God did come into human flesh and God did tabernacle with men, You say, oh, well, that's too outrageous. I cannot possibly accept this. It must be a delusion. You just say that there is such a story, but just a second, you just admitted that Jesus made these claims. So it's no longer just a story, is it? It's no longer just a story. Okay, so you've actually shown your position to be inconsistent. Okay? And as for, well, I already addressed the point about human life being full of misery, Darwinism being incompatible with the Bible. That doesn't bother me because I don't believe in Darwinism. And again, Darwinism doesn't account for the origin of life. Even though Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, he never actually wrote about how the first species came into being. So I'm sorry, but everything that you've said so far hasn't helped you. I think that you've, as I say, you've completely undercut your position by invoking my God in order to try and make sense of the foundation of your worldview, and then you throw them out. Okay? So, anyway, come back up to the mic if you want to. Otherwise, mic is free.
Hey, Royal Sun, can I get a mic check? Can you hear me? Good to hear your voice. Just kind of cleaning up here. Ready to go work out. But listening to your interaction with Abu Dawood, I gotta tell you, you make arguing with atheists fun. To be honestly, I couldn't. I just get bored with atheists because, well, they completely contradict themselves in so many ways, shapes, and forms.